Every single morning, you wake up, go to work, spend 8 to 10 hours of your one and only life.
Oh my God, bro. Oh, hell.
And in exchange, someone hands you a rectangle of printed paper, and you accept it, without question, without hesitation, without once stopping to ask who decided this was worth anything at all. Because somebody did decide that, at a specific moment in history. And the story of how they convinced an entire civilization to trust a piece of paper with their survival
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
is one of the strangest, most fascinating psychological experiments ever conducted on the human species. This shift from commodity money to paper money is not just an economic footnote. It is one of the most consequential psychological transitions in the entire history of human civilization. Without it, the Industrial Revolution as we know it could not have happened. Modern nation-states could not have financed themselves. The global trade networks that put food on your table and fuel in your car would not exist in any recognizable form. And right now, in 2026, we are living through the second version of this exact same transition. From paper to digital, from physical currency to numbers on a screen, Bitcoin, central bank digital currencies, digital wallets, contactless payments. The arguments happening right now about whether digital money is real money are the exact same arguments that happened when paper money was introduced, word for word, fear for fear, which means that understanding how humanity made the first transition is the most useful thing you can know about the transition currently happening around you. So let's go back to the beginning, all the way back to before money existed at all. Go back far enough in human history, and money does not exist. Not coins, not paper, not digital balances, nothing. What exists instead is direct exchange. You have something I need. I have something you need. We trade. Simple, immediate, human. Archaeological evidence suggests that trade between human groups predates settled civilization entirely. Before humans built permanent villages, before they cultivated fields or domesticated animals, they were already exchanging objects with each other. Obsidian tools moving hundreds of miles from their volcanic source. Shells found far inland. Pigments appearing in settlements with no local source. Humans were traders before they were farmers. But direct exchange runs into a structural problem, almost immediately, the moment human societies start to grow. Economists call it the double coincidence of wants. Here it is in its simplest form. You are a fisherman. I am a farmer. I want fish. You want grain. We trade. Everyone is happy. But here is the immediate complication. My harvest comes in once a year, in autumn. Your fish come in daily, and spoil within days. I cannot trade you a harvest I have not yet gathered. You cannot hold fish for 6 months waiting for my harvest to arrive. We are stuck. In a small village, this is an occasional inconvenience. In a growing civilization with thousands of people, hundreds of specializations, and complex supply chains, the double coincidence of wants becomes a structural crisis. Every transaction requiring a perfect two-way match of needs, at the same moment, with the right quantities on both sides, brings a growing economy to a grinding halt. The solution to this problem is one of the most important intellectual breakthroughs in human history. It is also one of the simplest. I spent months breaking down that exact story into something you can actually use to upgrade your own mindset. It's all inside my new ebook, The Evolution of Human's Journey. If you've ever wanted a clear, fascinating look at human history, psychology, and where we're headed next, this is for you. Here's the best part. It's completely free. I put this on a pay-what-you-want model. So if you want to snag it for $0, you can. If you want to support my work and drop $10, $100, or even $1,000, that's entirely up to you. You set the price that feels right for you. Just click the Gumroad link in the description below, name your price, and grab your copy right now. The solution is a third good, not something either party actually needs for its own sake, something both parties agree to accept, as a placeholder for value that can be exchanged later for whatever either party actually wants. An intermediary, a universal translator between different types of value, money. History confirms this with remarkable variety. Cattle served as money across ancient agricultural societies. The Latin word for money, pecunia, derives directly from pecus, meaning cattle. On the island of Yap in the Pacific, enormous limestone discs served as currency, some so large they were never moved at all. Ownership simply transferred through community agreement. One particularly famous stone sits at the bottom of the ocean, lost during a transport voyage centuries ago. And to this day, its ownership is still recognized. No one has seen it in hundreds of years. Everyone agrees it still counts. Cowrie shells served as currency across East Asia, South Asia, and large parts of Africa for thousands of years, making them arguably the most widely used form of money in human history. Cigarettes have functioned as currency in prisons and prisoner of war camps in the modern era. The specific object matters far less than the shared agreement about its value. That shared agreement, that collective social contract, is what money actually is. Not the object, the agreement. Of all the objects humanity tried, precious metals, and gold in particular, emerged as dominant. Gold does not rust, does not rot, does not decompose. A gold coin buried for 1,000 years comes out of the ground, looking essentially the same as when it went in. Gold is rare enough that accumulating meaningful quantities requires real effort, but not so rare it is practically inaccessible. Gold is divisible, universally recognizable. A merchant in ancient Rome and a merchant in ancient China, with no knowledge of each other's civilizations, would both immediately understand the value of gold. For most of recorded human history, gold won. But commodity money carries within it a set of structural limitations that only become visible when economies grow large enough to stress the system. The first limitation is physical. Gold is heavy. Moving large quantities across long distances through territories that may not be secure is expensive, dangerous, and logistically complex. The second limitation is debasement. When a government needs more money than it has gold to back, the temptation to quietly reduce the gold content of each coin while maintaining its face value is enormous. Melt down existing coins, add cheaper metal, recast as the same denomination. The face value stays constant. The actual value decreases. Inflation follows. Crisis follows that. And the third limitation is the most fundamental. Scarcity, the property that makes gold valuable, also makes it finite, and a finite monetary supply is a ceiling on economic growth. When Spain began importing enormous quantities of silver and gold from the Americas in the 16th century, flooding European markets with newly available precious metal, the result was not prosperity. It was severe sustained inflation across the entire European monetary system. Something needed to change. The solution did not emerge from Europe. It emerged from Tang Dynasty China, approximately the 7th century CE. Chinese merchants conducting large transactions faced the same gold is heavy problem that merchants everywhere faced. But the scale of Chinese commercial activity and the sophistication of Chinese administrative systems created the conditions for a genuinely novel solution. Merchants began depositing their copper coins with trusted merchants or government offices and receiving in return a paper receipt documenting the deposit. That receipt, called a jiazi, could then be exchanged with other merchants who knew it could be redeemed for the coins it represented. The paper was not money. It was a promise of money. But in practice, for merchants who trusted the issuing institution, the promise functioned exactly like the money itself. No heavy coins to transport. No physical vulnerability during transit. Just a piece of paper representing value that existed somewhere else. By the Song Dynasty in the 10th and 11th centuries CE, the Chinese government had begun issuing official government-backed paper notes, the world's first government-issued paper currency. And with it, the world's first experiment in what economists now call fiat money, currency whose value derives not from the material it is made of, but from institutional authority and collective trust. Here is the intellectual leap that makes paper money genuinely remarkable. A gold coin has value you can hold in your hand, weight, density, the physical reality of a scarce material that took effort to extract from the earth. A paper note has none of that. Its value exists entirely in the shared belief that it will be accepted by the next person and the person after that, and every person in the chain extending forward into an uncertain future. That is not a small psychological ask. The Chinese government understood early that maintaining that agreement required institutional credibility. If the government issued more paper notes than it had coin to back, trust would collapse, and with it, the entire system. Overissue, inflation, loss of trust, monetary crisis, reform, repeat. The history of early Chinese paper money is largely a history of governments learning this lesson the hard way. Paper money reached Europe considerably later and met considerably more resistances. European merchants first encountered sophisticated paper-based financial instruments through contact with the Islamic world, where instruments called hawala had enabled the transfer of value across long distances without physical currency movement for centuries. Italian trading cities developed their own versions, bills of exchange, letters of credit, financial instruments that represented value without being value themselves. But these remained tools for sophisticated merchants. The general population, accustomed to coins they could weigh and test, remained deeply skeptical of paper. The first European experiments with government-issued paper currency in Sweden in the 1660s and in France in the early 1700s ended badly. Sweden's first paper money experiment collapsed within years as the issuing bank printed more notes than it could redeem. John Law's experiment in France, arguably the most ambitious early European attempt at a paper-based monetary system, ended in the Mississippi Bubble of 1720, one of the most spectacular financial collapses in European history, a crisis so severe it set back French acceptance of paper money by decades. The lesson Europe learned slowly and painfully was the same lesson China had been learning since the Tang Dynasty. Paper money works when institutions are credible, And credibility cannot be printed. It can only be earned. The institution that finally cracked the code of sustainable paper money in Europe was not a government. It was a bank. The Bank of England, established in 1694, was founded under specific and urgent circumstances. England was at war with France. The war was expensive. The government had exhausted its immediate capacity to raise funds through taxation and direct borrowing. A group of merchants proposed a deal. They would lend the government £1.2 million in exchange for the right to incorporate as a bank, accept deposits from the public, and issue paper notes backed by those deposits and the government debt they held. The government accepted. And in that transaction, the template for the modern central bank was born. What the Bank of England did differently from every failed experiment before it was deceptively simple. It maintained credibility through restraint. It did not print more notes than it could reasonably redeem. It built institutional systems, auditing, reserve requirements, transparent accounting, designed to make its promises genuinely trustworthy over time. It understood that the asset it was actually selling was not paper. It was confidence. And confidence, once lost, is almost impossible to rebuild. Trust accumulated slowly. Transaction by transaction, decade by decade, merchants who accepted Bank of England notes and found them reliably redeemable told other merchants. The network of trust expanded outward. By the 18th century, Bank of England notes were the dominant medium of commercial exchange in England. The model was replicated across Europe and eventually the world. The Industrial Revolution that transformed human civilization was financed in significant part by paper money systems built on this template. The massive capital mobilization required to build railways, factories, steamships, and global trade networks would have been impossible within the constraints of a purely commodity-based monetary system. Paper money, backed by institutional credibility rather than physical metal, provided the financial flexibility that industrial transformation required. The resistance had been overcome, not through force, through the slow, patient accumulation of demonstrated trustworthiness. Here is where the history becomes immediately relevant to your life today. Transition from commodity money to paper money was not primarily a technical change. It was a psychological one. It required an entire civilization to shift its understanding of what value actually is. From value is in the object itself, the weight of the gold, the rarity of the shell, to value is in the shared agreement about the object, the institutional credibility behind the promise, the collective trust that makes the system function. That shift took centuries. It faced enormous resistance. It failed repeatedly before it succeeded. And right now, we are living through the third version of this exact same transition, from paper to digital. From physical notes to numbers on a screen, from central bank currency to decentralized cryptocurrency. From wallets to digital payment systems processing billions of transactions without a single physical object changing hands. The arguments happening right now about whether Bitcoin is real money, whether digital assets have genuine value, whether central bank digital currencies can be trusted, are structurally identical to the arguments that happened when paper money was introduced. Is it really worth anything? What backs it? What happens if the institution behind it fails? The specific technology is different. The fundamental question is the same. What makes something money is not what it is made of. It is what enough people agree it is worth. Gold, cowrie shells, paper notes, digital tokens, different objects, same agreement. And understanding how that agreement was built and rebuilt and extended across new technologies throughout human history is the most useful framework available for understanding what is happening to money right now. The history of paper money is not ancient history. It is the operating manual for the present. If this gave you a genuinely new way of thinking about something you interact with every single day, share it with someone who has never stopped to ask where money actually came from. Because the people who understand the history of trust are the people best positioned to navigate what comes next. And if you want to go deeper into the hidden economic and psychological forces shaping the world you live in, the next video is already waiting. I will see you in it.